Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, Brother Abdul Wasil Adekoya. And also, I want to use this opportunity to thank our able lecturer, Ustaz Lofty, for his beautiful presentation. Once again, my brothers and sisters, it's nice. I can't see any of you, but I guess you can see and hear my voice. I want to use this opportunity to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of you. I really miss all of you. I haven't seen my brothers and sisters in a while, and it's all due to the unfortunate circumstance that we find ourselves currently. I know COVID has been a very contentious issue, and we know that just over a year ago, the whole world was thrown into this quagmire of happenings about COVID and what have you. And shortly after that, in March 2020, the whole world went into a lockdown. Unfortunately, things are still more or less the same. And I am sure that for most of us here, well, if not all of us, most of us here will have heard or we probably would know somebody who has unfortunately been affected with COVID. And sadly, we also may know people who have lost their lives to COVID. Also quite surprising as well that we know that as Blacks, well, I mean, I guess we're all Blacks here, people from the Black and ethnic minority groups are in a way more at risk of having this severe infection. So I think it is quite expedient, it's very important. It is proper that we talk about this condition and find out how what it is all about. And I also note that now that we have the vaccines, there's been a lot of anxiety about COVID vaccines and what have you, or is it safe? Has it been properly tested? Is this? Is somebody trying to alter my DNA and turn me into someone else? There's been quite a lot of conspiracy theories out there. And I think it's about time we talk about this contentious issue. And I think it's also time that we, as a group, as a community, also discuss and maybe iron out some of these anxieties that we may have. Alhamdulillah, today we have amongst our midst a very distinguished Muslim brother. I know him personally. I've met him and his lovely family. We work together at the same hospital. Dr. Javeed Ahmed, he is a consultant microbiologist, consultant virologist. He's an expert in viruses. Currently works as a consultant in Southend Hospital in Essex. And he's also a honorary consultant microbiologist to King's College Hospital in London. He has, alhamdulillah, agreed to give us a talk about COVID, including talks about vaccines, and is more than happy to take any questions that we may have. I know we probably will have a lot of questions regarding this, so I won't want to waste any of our time any longer. I shortly will call in Brother Javeed Ahmed to give us his talk, and after that we will have a question and answer session. Now, the question and answer session, I know there will be quite a lot of questions, so it might be that we might take all the questions at once, or some of the questions might be repetitions, and then he would try to answer them as much as best to the best of his ability. I might also need to chip in if needed. So without wasting much of your time, I would hands off and leave the floor to Dr. Javeed Ahmed. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just checking if everybody can hear me. Thumbs up. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah, the Rabb of the worlds, and peace and blessings on His beloved Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you so much, Dr. Taofeek, and thank you, Nii, for inviting me. This is such a huge honor and a privilege to speak to all of you. I'm not new to the West African community. I lived in Southeast London, and I worked in Southeast London for at least 10 years. I got lots of family friends from West African community, one of the best people on the planet, I should say. And again, assalamu alaikum to all my mothers, my sisters, brothers, and the children here. And thank you for taking time to listen to me. So what I would do is I would just talk take a few of your minutes and mention why we are here, and then take the questions from you all. Inshallah, I'll try to do my best to see how the fears of the vaccine can be allayed. So how come we are here now? A lot of people ask me about this. Oh, this is coronavirus. One thing I would like to tell you is viruses have been there with us for a millennia. They have been with us, and particularly coronaviruses. It's not new. There have been scientists who have spent their lifetime behind coronaviruses, 40, 50 years. There have been excellent articles which have been published, 40 years of coronavirus research. So we know there are a few medically important viruses, coronaviruses, which have been circulating, which typically cause very mild common cold kind of infection. The assumption is that at some point, these coronaviruses, when they emerged at some point in human history, they would have possibly caused a COVID-19 like disease in the beginning, and then they got melted and dissolved as common cold viruses. Now, in 2002, you may have heard the original SARS-CoV, SARS coronavirus, which emerged in 2002 and moved across the continents. But fortunately, alhamdulillah, that was arrested within 18 months, and that virus is no longer in circulation. And back in 2012, there was an emergence of a new virus from the Middle East, what we call as MERS coronavirus, again a member of the family of the coronaviruses, and causing a significant mortality among the Middle East population, and also causing a havoc in the hospitals, particularly in Middle East and South Korea. It's not gone away. It is still circulating in dromedaries and camels, and a significant portion of the Middle Eastern population do carry antibodies against MERS-CoV. Now, what has happened is, because the SARS-CoV, the original 2002, was easily eradicated, and the MERS-CoV, it was found out that it doesn't affect the global population, affected only the Middle East. Initially, there was a lot of interest on the MERS-CoV, and then quickly that got waned off. There was almost a vaccine made available for MERS-CoV, but because of the lack of interest, and it was thrown into the back burner. Now, vaccine production is not easy. You need big technological know-how to produce vaccines in a large scale, particularly in a pandemic. As you know, in the end of 2019 in Wuhan, China, a new virus emerged, which was linked to the coronaviruses. And in January, they published the entire sequence. They made it widely available on the public domain, on the entire nucleic acids of the coronaviruses. And as virologists, we knew that a lot of people were concerned that this is going to be a pandemic, and it was. And very quickly, within 2 or 3 months, in March 2020, the WHO declared that officially that this is a pandemic now, which has crossed more than one continent. Almost every country on the planet, as we speak, has been affected with coronaviruses. If you look up on the Johns Hopkins data, which is quite a good website to see the numbers, and you would see horrified to see that there are more than nearly 2.5 million deaths. And these are actually reported deaths. God knows how many were unreported, and then millions of infections. You might have seen the data from UK in the last few weeks, which is quite disturbing, and mortality. I mean, daily people dying. So this is real, because some people say, "Well, this is fake news. This is unreal." This is real. The virus has been established, has been seen under the electron microscope, has been detected in the laboratory environment, and has been prone to cause the COVID-19. And the scientists who worked on COVID-19 are still working, are all across the planet. none of the scientists have come with the fake news saying that this is unreal. It is here and it is unlikely to get eradicated or eliminated. The best outcome for this is possibility that it'll eventually melt away like a common cold virus in the community. So how come, moving on to the current topic about the key thing of the vaccination, is what happened in the last 10, 11 months? How come we developed this vaccine so quickly? Background, again, coronaviruses are not new for scientists. There has been 3 decades of mRNA vaccine research. And mRNA vaccine research, it couldn't be implemented because of loads of bottlenecks. And then the MERS-CoV vaccine was almost ready. So when this vaccine, when this, a virus has got a nucleic acid, and the coronavirus is RNA virus. A virus can have what we call as an RNA or what we call as the DNA. It cannot have both. The coronavirus is an RNA virus, which means it's got a single, it's got an RNA which codes for and subhanAllah, the way the viruses works are quite intelligent. You have the kind of a sequence. One sequence says, okay, I'm going to code for this envelope, the envelope of the virus. Another sequence is it will do the job of, I'm going to protect the main brain of the virus, which is a nucleic acid, which is called the helmet of the virus, which is a nucleic capsid. And then there are membrane proteins as well. So the entire, there are 30,000 kind of nucleotides in a coronavirus. But the main nucleotides which we are concerned is the one which helps the virus to enter into the human host. It has to have a key, and the key has to match the lock. Without the key and the match lock, the virus will not be able to enter the host cell. And viruses cannot multiply on their own. They cannot replicate. They need human host. They are like what we call in science as obligate intracellular parasites. It means without a cell, they are not going to multiply. So their main drive is to enter a cell. So what the key of the virus, the key of the coronavirus, COVID-19, is a spike protein. It's on the surface, and once somebody inhales or it enters into the human host cell, then if there is a matching lock, and human beings have the matching lock for the COVID-19 virus, it attaches to it, and once it's attached, the brain of the virus, which is the brain and heart of the virus, which is the nucleic acid, enters inside the cell, and then it produces thousands and thousands and thousands of copies. And then they come out of that cell, they destroy that cell, and they start infecting the other cells. So that's how the first primary damage happens in COVID-19, and then I don't want to go into the secondary damage, which is related to the immune system. Now when this nucleic acid, the brain and the heart of the virus was revealed, it was identified, the 30,000 nucleotides. There were scientists who were already working on mRNA vaccine, and they thought, well, this can be a useful thing. We will take the spike, the key of the virus which attaches to the lock, the human cell. We will try to take the code which manufactures the spike for the virus, and will incorporate in our mRNA, and we'll put it inside a human host cell and see what happens. So what they did was, early March 2020, they were able to develop inside a laboratory. They did not took this from anybody, from any animals or anything. They took this. You can manufacture this mRNA synthetically inside a lab. So they took that mRNA, and then they first tested it on animals, which is basically mouse model testing. And they determined, well, this is fine, this is safe, the mouse doesn't die, and it also elicits antibodies, which are protective antibodies. Let's try it on a few of the human beings. And it went on to next thing, what we call as a phase 1 clinical trial, where you get small amount of small human volunteers, you inject them to try to see how much of vaccine is required, how much of vaccine, how frequently you need to give this vaccine. So that all is determined in phase 1, and they published in very early, within a couple of months, it was published, that phase 1. And once phase 1 is passed, which all the 3 vaccines which are licensed as of now in UK passed all the phase 1 trials successfully, they go on to what we call as phase 2 clinical trials. And phase 2 is there are more human volunteers, and it's just to see what the adverse effects are, what are the side effects, and it found to be a very safe vaccine, and they went on to do the phase 3 vaccine, the phase 3 trial, sorry. So among the phase 3 trials, the Pfizer had more than 40,000 volunteers, Moderna had more than 40,000 volunteers, AstraZeneca had nearly more than 20,000 volunteers. And among these, more than 100,000 volunteers in these 3 different vaccine trials, half of them who had received the vaccine, and the other half of them had received what we call as placebo. And people who received the vaccine and who received the placebo were not aware what kind of product they are receiving, because they wanted to. In a good study, we want to keep them blind. They should not be aware what they are actually receiving, so that it does not alter their behavior. And then, middle of last year, when people used to ask us the question, how quickly do you think we'll get the vaccine? The fastest time prior to this, the vaccine has been manufactured and rolled out to the public was the mumps vaccine, which took a little bit less than 5 years. And we were thinking, because we're in the pandemic, and the fastest we can do is 18 months. So we were probably thinking middle of this year, we might have a vaccine. But the mRNA vaccine component has got a very good propensity to manufacture and in billions the doses, and because we are in the middle of the pandemic, it was easy to recruit volunteers, and the bureaucracy was fast-tracked as well. All the countries of the world cooperated with each other in producing this vaccine, in producing different forms of various platforms of vaccine. So when the phase 3 trials were published, it was a pleasant and a very good surprise, alhamdulillah, that more than the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, they were more than 90 to 95% efficacious. We were anticipating the best vaccine, like the influenza vaccine, would probably be 60 to 70% efficacious, but alhamdulillah, it was more than 90% efficacy, which is extremely good, and it comes as a pleasant thing to all of us. And then quickly, what followed was the AstraZeneca vaccine, and also it was nearly 70% efficacious. But in preventing severe COVID-19, it was more than 90% efficacious. So none of these vaccines, which have been fast-tracked, they've all been published in the public domain. The phase 3 trials, it's available for the public to see. They have all been independently analyzed. The data has been independently analyzed. None of and they have been analyzed by different countries, like in the US, the FDA and the EUA authorities. Then in the UK, we have the MHRA, and then in the European Union, we have got their own medical regulatory authorities, which have reviewed independently the trials. They looked at the statistics, and is convincing when you look at the data of the phase 3 trials, of all the 3 trials which have been published, and it's convincing that they are safe, efficacious, and they do what they're designed to do. So that's in a nutshell how we are here in terms of these vaccines, and we need different platforms. And you might have heard in the last few days more news about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the Novavax vaccine. Possibly they'll get an emergency approval next month, and they would quickly be rolled out as well. So that's a brief summary of the vaccines. Now, some people still tell that this virus was deliberately released, and the virus was designed in the laboratory, and then the government deliberately released. I mean, to answer that, we need to know, like, if the nucleotides of the virus, each particular nucleotide, they got what we call as codons, and they code for something specific. Okay, and it is impossible as of now. Even the most brilliant virologist has to be a million times smarter than what he is to design a virus. We can actually study the virus and know the sequence of the virus, and then go on to inside the lab and synthetically manufacture that nucleotide sequence, the codon sequence. But the knowledge of designing a virus is next to impossible as of now. And some people say, well, it was bad coronavirus, and which the Chinese government deliberately modified it and made it into affect human beings. To do that, somebody again has to be smart. it's just like having, if you are given a Lego puzzle, and you have it when when you buy it from the shop, and then before even opening it, if you just shake it, you cannot make the end product. That's how, I mean, the viruses are 1,000 times more complicated than a Lego puzzle. Nobody can actually design it and say, well, I'm going to design this virus which will affect the human beings, which will attach this receptor, which is going to kill only the elderly people, which is going to cause havoc. Is impossible at this current state of knowledge. And one other thing which I had to go back to the vaccine, sorry, is another myth which is circulating, is this mRNA vaccines. And the mRNA vaccine gets somehow integrated into host chromosome and can affect human beings. Now, that myth has evolved because human beings, when you study our genome, we do share some of our chromosomes, some of our nucleic acid with the viruses. 10% of nearly of human chromosome matches of the viruses. Viruses do infect, and sometimes some viruses can get integrated into the human chromosome. But it's not going to change how we behave, or how it doesn't change our physical features. So there is this myth involved that this mRNA vaccine can also do that. Number one, mRNA is not a DNA. You need the mRNA to become a DNA to integrate into the host chromosome. Number two, the mRNA vaccine is delivered through a liposome, and mind you, there are no nanochips or nothing inside this. Okay, so it's delivered inside into the muscle cell, and once inside the muscle cell, the liposome which carries the mRNA is dissolved, and the mRNA codes for the key, which is the spike, and it does not manufacture the entire virus at all, because there's no codes for the entire virus. There's got a code only for the spike protein. So as soon as the spike protein is manufactured, after 7 to 10 days, the mRNA is self-degrading. It does not, and even the Oxford vaccine is a non-replicating vaccine. So which means they are going to eventually die out. So once the mRNA codes for the spike protein, and the body's immune system recognizes, oh, hang on, this is not part of my body, this looks foreign, and it mounts quickly an immune response. And then you have this policeman, the immune system policeman, circulating or the patrolling the human body. And it's amazing, subhanAllah, if you look at the immune system, that itself is an overwhelming evidence of the unity of Allah. These cells, what we call as astrocytes, not astrocytes, dendritic cells, the antigen presenting cells, they recognize this as foreign. They process this spike protein, and they take it to the lymphatic system, and then they take it to the immune system, and then what we call as antibodies are produced against the key, as well as a memory is formed. So what happens is, once if that individual encounters the COVID-19 virus, then the antibodies go and lock prevent the key attaching to the lock. So that's how, and they prevent damage happening. So that's how they work, and I hope I have allayed some fears. I think at this point I will stop, and I will take questions. Thank you so much. Thank you again for patiently listening to me.
Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Ahmed. That was very beautifully done. Jazakallah khairan. I pray Allah reward you abundantly. Just to summarize briefly what he spoke about in a few minutes, he did mention that we have had coronaviruses around for a while. They are not new. He talked about the severe acute respiratory syndrome virus, the SARS virus, which was first noticed in 2002 and then later expired. Also talk about the Middle East respiratory virus, also known as the MERS virus, quite predominant in the Middle East region. Of course, now the COVID virus that we're talking about is also a corona virus. Unfortunately, he did quote some worrying statistics about the rate of mortality. You can imagine more than 2.5 million people all over the world already dead. And locally in the UK, we know the sad news about, God goodness me, I think as of today, it's about 105,000 or more people already dead from COVID. This is not to mention those that didn't get into the statistics, those that are still suffering from long COVID. He also talked about the pathophysiology of these infections, how they happen. He talked about the lock and key system. The spike protein is actually the main culprit here, which enables the virus to attach to a host cell, and then once it's attached to a host cell, the nucleotide in the virus, which is the RNA, gets incorporated into the host system to produce and then destroys the cells in that instance. He also talked about the vaccinations, why there's been so much anxiety that the vaccines came out too quickly. The vaccines had not been properly tested. Of course, we know coronaviruses have been here for a while, for more than 10 years, well, more than 20 years actually. And we know about the coronaviruses. We have actually before now even matched some of the genetic codes for some of these viruses. And why did the vaccines come out so quickly? Because there was a lot of bureaucratic red tapes were cut. We know that before viruses before vaccines can be made, you have to talk about which companies are going to sponsor this. You talk about money. Is this really what are we going to make a lot of money from this? And once it's all approved, they have to now look for volunteers. Where are the people with these infections? You have to go around the world for several years just to get volunteers. That wasn't the case here. We had volunteers everywhere over the world. All the companies, all the countries in the world were all ready to cooperate because all the economies were down. Everything was totally locked down. So it was in everybody's interest to work together to come to a quick solution. So this is what some of the reasons why the vaccine came out quicker than expected. Of course, it's mentioned that the vaccines are safe, and they also try to debunk the myth about somebody trying to alter one's DNA. Obviously, this is completely untrue. I will shortly leave the floor for questions and answers. I think I have a question here already, and while people are thinking of what questions to ask, may I set the ball rolling, Dr. Ahmed, if that's okay? That why do some people still get the COVID infection even after having had their vaccine, the first dose? We know a lot of people have had the first dose of the vaccine and shortly afterwards come down with the infection. Is there any logical explanation for this? Please, brothers and sisters, you can either post your questions on the chat or ask them directly, whichever way is fine. And then the second question I would ask this person, this was posted on the chat, was that we know there are several vaccines around now. We talked about the AstraZeneca, the Moderna, and of course the Pfizer vaccines. And of course, you mentioned the Novavax and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines coming into play as well. That which of these vaccines is preferable? If you had the option of choosing which of them to have, that which of them would you advise people to have based on their effectiveness data and all that? Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you very much. That's a very those two questions are very good questions. Particularly the first one, why do people get infected despite having the first dose of the vaccine? The way the vaccines work is they do take some time for the immune system to act on it, to react and mount an antibody response. And the antibody response, once it goes incremental over a period of time. The SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19, what we call as the incubation period. Incubation period means that from the exposure to development of the disease, the incubation period for every virus is different. For COVID-19, we say it's 2 to 14 days, but we know, as a matter of fact, the median is between 5 to 6 days. So somebody might have had a vaccine, and the vaccine average time to produce antibodies is more than 10 to 12 days, on an average 14 days after the first dose. So theoretically, somebody can get exposed around the time of vaccination, or even a few days after the vaccination. And then because the immune system is still taking time to respond to the vaccination, but your patient has already been exposed and the virus gets there first. So that explains why some individuals may get the disease even before the vaccine kicks in. Now, there is another component to this question, which is even after having the one dose, then some individuals still are getting infection. Now, number one, these are tiny proportion. Now, we have to keep in mind 6 million people in UK have already been vaccinated. The number of people who have been infected or reinfected are very, very tiny, few, a handful of numbers. To answer that question, I had to take back to some basics of this coronavirus. When I said this is an RNA virus have a kind of a problem, which works in both in their favor, in their advantage, as well as their disadvantage. RNA viruses, they have a propensity to mutate, unlike DNA viruses. What happens is, when I said there are 30,000 nucleotides, and each virus, I mean, once each host can have billions of viruses after 24 hours. So what happens if for every 1,000 nucleotide replication, there is a possibility of one error in that 1,000 nucleotide, and the virus doesn't correct it. Okay, if it happens in the human host, because we correct it, we have got a mechanism to correct it. But the RNA viruses lack that kind of absolute proofreading mechanism. So they tend to, over a period of time, even hours, then you can tend to have developed mutants. Now, sometimes these mutants can be advantageous, sometimes they are not. So sometimes they might actually end up damaging the virus, and the virus is unsustainable, it goes away. But sometimes, like what we have seen, the B.1.1.7, which is in the popular media called the British variant, or the South African variant, or the Brazilian, these ones, they've been given the places of origin. These variants, or they may, over a period of time, what might happen is, because of this mutation, the mutation might confer some kind of an advantage to the virus. For example, it might make the key more sophisticated in attaching to the lock, or it might help the virus in replicating much more, or it may even help the virus in not causing a prolonged infection, because the virus, if it causes death in the host, it's not advantageous to the virus, because the goal of the virus is to infect everybody and to multiply and replicate everywhere. If it kills, it doesn't have its purpose. So maybe the mutations would arise which are less harmful to the host. So when that comes, when that mutation, as of now, what we know, as a matter of fact, is, although it is very small data, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, and I think also, although I have not seen the data for AstraZeneca, they definitely for Pfizer and Moderna, they, even with the variants, they still mount an immune response. So, to give you a simple answer to your question, the vaccines are 90 to 95% efficacious. AstraZeneca is 70%. That means still there is a chance, a good chance, 5 to 10% of the chance that the host might have not responded. And also we need to take into the factor, these efficacy data is after 2 doses, not after 1 dose. So maybe the host has not developed immune response, and therefore he has got infected again. Infected with the COVID-19. I hope that answers the first part of the question. Any queries on that?
No, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. That was well done. Actually, it's simply we do know, and this has already been in the news, that after having your first dose of vaccine, that you may it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for you to mount an immune response anyway, so you might not be protected in that time.
Well, one of the hot topics, a controversial topic in our country, is deferring the second dose to 10 to 12 weeks. Now, the manufacturer recommendations is the recommendation as they are done in their studies, which, for example, the Pfizer and the Moderna is 3 to 4 weeks, and even the AstraZeneca is 4 weeks apart.
4 weeks, yeah.
Okay, but there is an argument here. What the government has done is an epidemiological argument that if we, instead of giving 2 doses, if we give 1 dose, then we can vaccinate more number of people. However, I mean, that is an epidemiological argument. And what we don't know for sure is what we call in immunology is longevity of antibodies. How are we sure after one dose those antibodies persist for months, for maybe up to 3 months? No one knows. So it's a bit of gamble. I mean, the experimental science doesn't favor that government approach. But I hope the government is right, because and that gamble pays off, because we don't have a choice on that matter. But in terms of science, I would still stick to manufacturer recommendation. But as you know, it's beyond my remit to make the judgment. So,
absolutely.
yeah. I'll go on to the next question. If
are there any other questions from any? The floor is open, brothers and sisters. Please feel free to join. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Ahmed, for that beautiful presentation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you abundantly. My question is actually about the role of the vaccine. Based on the first question you answered, my question is, from my understanding, the vaccine is supposed to prevent you from having serious disease. Does it actually prevent you from getting the disease? So I mean, you could still test positive for the vaccine for the virus, but it won't affect you. You won't actually be. I thought that was the purpose of the vaccine. That it doesn't stop you from getting infected, but it stop you from getting ill from the infection. Please, can you clarify that?
Majid, brother, thank you, brother Majid. That's you are right. Yeah. And I mean, I didn't want to go into the nitty-gritty of the vaccines or the phase of the trials. The endpoint efficacy of the 3 vaccine trials, the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the AstraZeneca, the endpoint efficacy was prevention of severe disease. Okay, and one of the endpoints for AstraZeneca was mounting of antibody response. They did not go back. I'm aware Moderna did for a few individuals, but they, as a general rule, they did not go back and test each of their recipients weekly or twice a weekly, if or in a regular format, if the kind of a nose and throat swab to see if they have got infected or not. They have not done that. All which has been the most pertinent answer to what we wanted to have in the middle of the pandemic was, does it prevent severe COVID-19? That was the bottom line. Now, we know in COVID-19, we know in the majority of the infections, more than 90% of the infections are either asymptomatic or subclinical. I mean, they don't need to come to even to the medical attention. Some of the individuals, even who have experienced symptoms, they just, when they swab, they get surprised. Oh, I'm COVID positive. I just had a kind of a snuffle or even some headache or some sore throat. But and that's the majority of the population. Only a tiny portion of them eventually land up in problems, particularly people who are elderly, people who have got comorbidities like diabetes or immunosuppression. Those are the individuals who are more likely to get problems with COVID-19. Now, this vaccine, the endpoint efficacy, as I said, was to see how well prevented severe COVID. And that was the endpoint efficacy. It did not test efficacy against infection or efficacy against transmission. I think because these vaccines trials, they are not stopped. Although they have finished the phase 3 trials, they've gone into the regulatory review, and now what we call is they're under phase 4 trials, which they will be looking closely at and see what are the other benefits of people who have received a vaccine. Are they able to prevent infection in the first place, or even if they get the infection, are they able to prevent transmission to secondary individuals, particularly in close family members, or in healthcare workers? Does that answer your question, Brother Majid?
Jazakallah khairan. Yes, it does.
Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum salam. Please go ahead.
My question is, for someone who had the infection and then survived it, at which point does the vaccine, at which point does he need to take the vaccine? Because he has developed immunity already. So I would like an advice on that.
Thank you very much. That's a very excellent question. It's one of the hot topics. The question which I've asked, and highly intelligent question as well. The question what Brother Muhammad has asked is, if somebody gets an infection, natural infection, will they benefit from receiving the vaccine? What we know is from in UK we are doing something called siren study, and what we know, after a natural infection and people who recover from natural infection, their antibodies seem to persist for up to 5 to 6 months. We know that from the siren study, and our knowledge from other coronaviruses, the MERS coronavirus, the other coronaviruses which have been circulating as common cold coronaviruses, we know that the immunity lasts for maybe from 3 months to up to a year, sometimes 2 years. But this is an antibody immune system. There is something else in the immune system which we call as T cell immune system, which is the memories, and then this memory cell. The coronavirus experts who have been looking at the immunology of the coronavirus in the last many decades, they have observed that the immunity for coronaviruses can last for 3 to 4 years after a coronavirus infection. Now, I'm not saying it also holds good for COVID-19. I don't know. We can't say that because we have not gone that far to establish that fact. What the key thing to know is, somebody gets a COVID-19. One thing which we are not certain, this is an unknown in immunology, is that what kind of antibodies or what kind of immune system does a natural infection elicit? Sometimes some of the immune system can get compromised by natural infection. It doesn't necessarily mean a natural infection confers total protection. For example, in this case, does it prevent the virus entering inside the cell? We don't know. Because we have that unknown, we do recommend such individuals who are even just recovered from the COVID-19 to have the vaccine. Now, the second thing is that, majority of the COVID-19 patients who are in the hospital are vulnerable people, elderly people or people with comorbidities or from ethnic background. Okay, now we have to weigh the advantages and the risk and the benefit. Okay, the vaccine is, we know as a matter of fact from the phase 1 and the phase 2 and the phase 3 trials, that the antibody and the immune system it elicits is much more robust than a natural infection. That's been documented in these papers. Okay, so on that basis, I would recommend those who are at more of, even if you recover from an infection, to still have the vaccination. Now, what about otherwise, other individuals who are healthy? I would say reinfections in those who are naturally who have had natural infection, reinfections hardly happen within the first 10 to 12 weeks after having the infection. Okay, so what that means is you may defer to wait 10 to 12 weeks after the natural infection, and then when your time comes for the vaccination, you can have the vaccination. Does that answer your question, Brother Muhammad?
Yes, it does.
Assalamu alaikum. So, well, can I ask 2 questions? There's some people have put some questions online as well. So, first one, you haven't really answered the first question. Which of the vaccines would you recommend somebody to have?
Yes, I was going to come to that. But,
it's okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
It's okay. Now, in addition to that question, is there any particular reason, being that we are Africans from West Africa, why are people from the Black and ethnic minority, why are we so susceptible to this same infection? Do we have any convincing answers for this yet? Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Brother Taufeek, I think you are more, I think the questioner knows the answer better than the person who has been asked the question, I have to say. And now, there is no overwhelming evidence and there is no data from the literature to arrive to a kind of a conclusion to say why Black ethnic minorities and Asian African individuals are dying. We don't, but we know that that there are increased number of deaths. The hypothesis, or I would say hypothesis stroke speculation, is that majority of our communities, they are living in generation families. You can have the grandparents living with the children and the grandchildren. That's one thing. And also we live in closed environment. Also our houses, our economic, when compared to the other advantage population, we are living probably more close, I would say, terraced houses and in flats, and where the possibility of exposure is much higher. And then the another hypothesis is boiling down to the host itself. Maybe there are certain genes which make us more vulnerable. And then, mind you, take also into the context that the diabetes prevalence and certain other comorbidities prevalence is much higher in African Asian minorities than the white population. Maybe all these factors probably work close together, and there is a kind of a host and virus interaction in that kind of sense. But Taufeek, that's an excellent question. People are still investigating it. I don't think I have an answer. I think I'll be very happy to hear your views on that.
Alhamdulillah, yes. I think to summarize this is that we don't really know the reason for that. Just like you've said, the incidence of the prevalence of diabetes among blacks, Asian, and other ethnic minority is quite higher compared to the Caucasian. And diabetes, we know, is one of the very high risk factors, unfortunately, which lead to having severe infections. We also know that there is also the prevalence of obesity, people with high BMIs and all that. Also is one of those other risk factors that make you more prone to this condition. Of course, don't forget as well that, I don't know about Asians, but from the general African beliefs, African population, we are the ones that are very unlikely to go to the hospitals. We are very unlikely to go see our GPs, to get a routine health check. So a lot of people out there who say they are well and fit and well and okay, we don't really know what underlying conditions they have. We've seen a lot of blacks coming into hospital and then we're diagnosing them as diabetics. Have they been diabetic before they had the infection? Was that a risk factor in them? We don't really know. Somebody also mentioned something that, of course, especially for people that work in the health sector, don't forget that it's always the ethnic minorities are the ones that would not take improper precautions, not wear the appropriate PPEs to see before they go and see COVID patients and all that. But I think a lot of studies still needs to be done with regards to that aspect of things. Why are we more prone to having this infection? So, and the first question we asked, are you still there? Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. We know about the several vaccines we have, the AstraZeneca, the Moderna, and the Pfizer vaccines. And somebody has been asking me now that which of these vaccines would you recommend? Which of them is more effective, or which is the most effective? Which would you recommend for people to have? Assuming we have a choice anyway.
Well, walaikum salam, and this is one of the questions which is often asked, and how I wish this question shouldn't be asked, because we don't have a choice. Okay, although it's a nice question, but we don't have a choice. I mean, when your time comes for the vaccination, and whether they're giving whichever vaccine, Pfizer, Moderna, or AstraZeneca, or Janssen, or Novavax, whichever vaccine they're giving, and if it has been licensed, then I would recommend to take it. Now, if you want to probe me further with that question, I would say the efficacious data for endpoint efficacy for Pfizer and Moderna is more than 90 to 95%. And the three, I would say all of them have been transparent in their communications. But I do have some reservations with AstraZeneca. I would say, yes, they have been transparent, but it's, I would say, suboptimal, if I had to use that word. And it's efficacy is 70%. I would stop there. I don't think we have the luxury of making a pick and choose. I think and that data would eventually be teased out in the next coming months. And also keep in mind when the variants, because it will come at a time when the variants may not respond to the vaccine at some stage. That may happen in the near future. And when that happens, we need to see which of these vaccines can be very quickly tweaked to respond to the variants. So what we need to know is, are they efficacious enough? All three are, yes. Are they also efficacious against the variants, current variants? There is some data to say yes, they are. Are they safe? All three are. Is there any long-term side effects? Now I have to tell you, people worry about long-term side effects. No one is going to give a blank check here, because we are just 3 months into this rollout of the vaccine. I'm talking about including this phase 3 trials. No one can say, okay, here's the blank check, this vaccine is 100% safe. No one is going to say that. But what we can say is, when you have vaccine side effects, they typically happen, or I would say rather, almost certain to happen within the first 4 to 6 weeks after the vaccination. No one receives a vaccine, say in 1990 with a diphtheria or a MMR vaccine, and then develops side effects in 1995 or 2000 or 2020. It doesn't happen that way. It has never happened that way. And there are no long-term kind of side effects reported that way. Majority or almost all the side effects happen within the first 6 weeks. So in that context, I would say all three vaccines are safe. And I think just take it when your time comes, whichever you have been offered. I hope I've done my ability to answer that difficult question. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Yeah, go on.
Yeah,
Yes.
Dr. Ahmed, can you put things into a bit of context with us? In terms of the efficacy, I heard, please confirm for us, inshallah, that majority of the vaccine that we know for today, their efficacy is around 50%, 60%. And these new ones are actually 70% and above. So they are actually quite, efficacious. Is that true, would you say?
Brother Majid, I think you're mixing two or more different things at the same time. Okay, what we need to know, I think you're talking about on one hand variants, and it's a good question how efficacious the vaccine is to variants. Okay, now on the other hand is these trials, when they were done, the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the AstraZeneca were done. They were done and completed before the predominance of these variants. Okay.
No, sorry. I'm not talking about the variants. I'm talking about the vaccine that we know about, like the diphtheria, the mumps, and all that.
I did not understand you. Sorry.
Assalamu alaikum. I think his question is that we know that most other available vaccines we have, not for COVID, but for other ailments, the influenza vaccine, the MMR, measles, and all of that, that we know that the efficacy is not 100% or as high as 90s or 70s that we have now. But now that we have the COVID vaccine, they're now saying that the efficacy is 70% and above. And most of the other vaccines we have before now were not as efficacious. I mean, the percentage efficacy wasn't as high as this. He just wants to comment on that.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. My apologies, Brother Majid. I'm sincerely sorry. I did not understand your question. Now, that's actually a very good question. The way the immune system works, the vaccines work, they're different, and they're different for each different particular infection, a virus or a bacteria. Now, I'm not an expert to comment why this is 50%, why this is 90%, but as a matter of fact, we know this for sure, that, for example, like a response to the yearly flu vaccine, in a good year, when we say a good year, when the vaccine matches very well to the virus which is circulating, in a good year, the efficacy is 60%. In a bad year, it can be less than 10%. Okay, that's with the flu virus, we know as a matter of fact. Okay, now, for example, MMR vaccine, measles vaccine, the efficacy for measles, mumps, and rubella, measles vaccine, I'm talking about only the measles component, is more than 95%. With the two vaccines of MMR, more than 95% efficacy. And I believe that because measles is a highly infectious disease. What we call as the reproductive rate for measles in a virgin population is between 13 to 20. That means every one case of measles is potentially going to infect 13 to 20 other individuals. And measles, when it comes in outbreaks. And we know that even if there are 9 individuals in 10 immunized, you don't get an outbreak. So the efficacy of measles vaccine is more than 95% efficacious. For example, in Hep B vaccine, the Hep B vaccine, if we take properly 3 to 4 doses at the proper schedule, the efficacy of Hep B vaccine is more than 90% again. So there are vaccines which have got excellent efficacy data. And I appreciate there are vaccines which give only 50% efficacy data. And there might be vaccines like BCG vaccine. And when you ask the efficacy, some even say nothing, 0. Some say, 90%. It depends on whom you ask and at what point of time is that. The efficacy for different vaccines is different. Is alhamdulillah, this is a huge blessing that in the middle of the pandemic we have a vaccine which hardly contains 5 or 6 ingredients, the Pfizer and the Moderna, 5 or 6, which is more than 90 to 95% efficacy. I hope that answers your question, Brother Majid.
It does.
Any other questions on the floor? While we're waiting, there is a question I hear. I laugh at this question. Dr. Ahmed, is there a danger that the minority population are being targeted with these vaccines? I don't know what your opinion is, but that is the question. Is there a possibility?
The question is actually being targeted with the less effective vaccine. That's the question.
I see. Okay. I think it's I have to say to whichever brother asked that question, it is a bit controversial to ask like that. But however, I think I will try to see if I can answer that. I myself I'm not. Okay. Let me share the experience in the last 6 weeks in our country. Since the vaccines have been introduced mid-December to until now, the majority of the Asian population, I mean, they have declined. The Asian and African population, they are the ones who have declined the vaccine. The local population are overwhelmingly accepting the vaccine. Now, in terms of whether they have been offered a less effective vaccine, I am not in a position to answer that. I don't think so. I would be very surprised if that has happened. And if that has happened, then I think if that has come to your knowledge, then I think you need to seriously ask the person who and take it much higher to the next level to see if that is true, because it's a serious issue, and it actually causes distrust in already a distressed environment. I would advise. It has not come to my knowledge, and even we also have to appreciate the government doesn't have the luxury of having multiple vaccines as of now. We will have that luxury in a few months, hopefully, inshallah. But we have got only 3 vaccines: Moderna, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca, and all 3 are efficacious. I think it'll be a bit dubious for a government to take that risk and supply an ineffective, say that assuming that one of their own vaccine is ineffective. I think I would advise we need to, when somebody tells us that, confirm if that is true, and if that is true, I hope it is not, and if God forbid if that is true, take it to a higher level. I hope that gives you some assurance.
Assalamu alaikum. We've been here now for almost an hour. I really want to thank our speaker, Dr. Ahmed, for his time, and I pray Allah reward him abundantly. Any other last-minute burning question before we come to a close? You are free to ask. Otherwise, I want us to. Walaikum salam. This will be the final question, please.
Okay. Based on your experience, which of the vaccine will you recommend that we go for?
Brother Abdul Wasi, thank you. I think someone else asked that question earlier. And I answered that. And I would say we are not in that state of luxury to pick and choose. I would say when the time comes to take that vaccine and whichever vaccine they are offering, I would advise to take it. I answered it more detailedly. Brother Taufeek, if this is recorded, maybe this can be circulated to the wider audience.
Yes, we would. And I do appreciate that you've answered the question before. And I would also want to add my voice to that, definitely, I have any of the vaccines that are actually being given now. I mean, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, all of them have been proven to be safe and efficacious. Anyone that I'm offered, I will have. I mean, that's if I have a choice, which one I want to go for anyway. I don't think we have that choice, but even if I had a choice, I would go for any of them because they're all efficacious, they're all safe. Assalamu alaikum. So let's say Jazakumullah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yes.
Is this
sorry, brother
Wasi?
Brother Taufeek, sorry. I'm fine. I mean, I don't mind having more questions. Don't worry about me. And as long as if the audience is comfortable, I'm happy to take.
Okay. Jazakallah khairan for that. Brother Wasi, Rahim, I heard your voice.
Yes, sir. Jazakallah khairan, Doctor. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for agreeing to share your time and your knowledge with us today. So it's been a pleasure working with you to get you to the platform today. Thank you very much. So my question is around some sort of home remedies that are being used to manage COVID. There are people who take different kind of things, ginger, black seed oil, all these vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, and all of these things that we take at home, including even inhalation that we do at home and all that. So what are your views on these things? I'm sure that you must have come across a lot more that I've mentioned that we do at home.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair for your very kind words. Thank you, and Amin, and may Allah reward you immensely, and everybody here, inshallah. There is no restriction. This is an unrestricted environment. We live in a free world. We can try what we have available as long as we are able to follow the manufacturer recommendations. The reason I said that is, for example, vitamin D. The vitamin D, we know it is the same thing applies for any kind of product we are doing. I mean, zinc or whatever they're using, home remedies. That's fine, but one thing I would like to caution is we need to know when to seek medical attention. I mean, I wouldn't encourage anybody to say they're having a short of breath if they're being unable to speak. Okay, no, I don't want to go into the hospital. I want to try some my own medications. I think that is incorrect. We have to seek medical attention as soon as possible when any of those severe features arise. There should be no hesitancy with that. The black seed oil, everything. I mean, as long as you're taking it in the right proportions, right quantity, they should be fine. I mean, it boils into the pharmacology dictum. Every medicine is a poison in excess quantities, and every poison is a medicine in the right quantity. I hope that answers. Taufeek, I think you're in a better position to comment on that.
Unfortunately, I'm a non-believer in home remedies. So I've always believed in having a balanced diet and having everything in the right proportions. I know there has been definitely vitamin D has been studied. Quite a lot of us here in this country are vitamin D deficient anyway. So I would probably recommend vitamin D supplementation at the right doses. But zinc, selenium, whatever, ginger, as these are probably those immune boosters. They might boost your immunity, And you might want to extend it that, well, if your immunity is boosted, if your immunity is strong, you might be able to resist this infection. I mean, I don't think any of these have been proven, but just like you rightly said, home remedy should not preclude one from going to the hospital when we think we do need it. And the fact that somebody or some people are using some home remedies and they think they found it useful, they think it has worked for them, doesn't mean that if you do the same thing, it will work for you. We don't know what our underlying health conditions are. You don't know what that person's underlying health conditions are, what other things, or what other medications they're taking. I'm sorry, I'm a non-believer in home remedies, and I am purely scientific. If I have the proof, show me the evidence, and I'll believe you. That has always been my opinion, and it still is my opinion. Vitamin D, yeah, I've seen some papers about vitamin D. I'm happy to give to anybody that wants to read it. So definitely I would say that, but not for anything else, zinc or steam inhalation or whatever. Don't forget that steam inhalation has its own side effects as well. You could burn your pharynx and you could hurt yourself. It's useful. If you find it useful, if some people say they find it useful, fine. I mean, I won't, as a doctor, put just as a recommendation. And if you think you can take any other vitamin supplementation that will boost your immunity, fine. But my saying is always make sure you eat healthy, take adequate rest, drink plenty of fluids, exercise regularly. As long as you do all of that, I don't really think you need to go the way chewing ginger or taking zinc or selenium or whatever, unless there's any protein deficiency. Salam alaikum. I think this is about time that we put a stop to this. It's almost 10 o'clock. I really want to thank Dr. Ahmed for giving us his time and effort and energy to be here with us today. I pray, Almighty Allah, reward you abundantly for this, and I'm sure that my brothers and sisters have really benefited from your wealth of knowledge and your wealth of experience. We pray Allah continue to be with you and reward you abundantly. May this count as a hujjah for you on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And I pray Allah continue to keep you and your family safe as well. Jazakumullah khairan once again. And I pray that Allah continue to reward and keep all of us safe. Please, my brothers and sisters, if we are offered the vaccine, let us go for it. Alhamdulillah, I've had my first dose and I'm still alive, and I don't think my DNA has changed in any way. So, Jazakallah khairan everybody for attending. Let me hand the floor over to Brother Abdulwasil for any concluding remarks. Any
Can I just say something? Can I just say,
yes,
Brother
sir. Yes,
and
sir.
no, I just wanted to thank you, Brother Taofeek, and to everybody here, to the Vanguard community, and it's amazing, and it's just yes, honor and privilege to be and share your thoughts. Jazakallah khair, and thank you so much. And one last thing I would like to add before going away is that I like this analogy, and I would like to share this analogy with you. If you have a dam, and when the dam has got some creeks, okay, and the dam has got water, the creeks are not going to break the dam, okay. But when there is a monsoon and it gets flooded, then the creeks will give way and the wall will break, and there'll be huge problem. The analogy which I want to try to drive is when the time comes to take for your vaccine, please, I would say take it, because we want to develop the herd immunity. The end game, at least in our society at this present time, the end game for the COVID-19 pandemic is the vaccine. We need to develop the herd immunity. And the last year when we started, people thought it was 60%. Now the experts think the herd immunity for the COVID-19 should be at least be 80%. So which means we cannot have pockets of people declining vaccination. I mean, those people who decline vaccination, they're not really, there'll not be leaks, there'll be holes in the dam. And when in the middle of when you have this pandemic, then that thing will break, and then we'll have pockets of infections among different kind of communities. So I just wanted to give that analogy before I went to end. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you again for patiently listening to me.